to show this is not the same as slavery we think of today. If you have verses, put them in the comment section. If you have another thought, back it up with some evidence. Don't just say it's chattel slavery. Because then who's the fool? Who's the one coming without evidence, bro? All right, how you guys doing today? We're about to hop into a little reaction of first things first, though. Just want to make sure y'all like the video, hit a like, exit full screen, scroll just a little bit, like the video, full screen and back up. You feel me? So I think this video puts the way that slavery worked in the Old Testament pretty succinctly, right? So we're gonna watch this, and then we're gonna watch a longer video on the topic, because so many people want to keep saying you can rape your slaves in a thing, and you could buy and sell them and beat them and all that. And it's like, yeah, you can beat them for discipline's sake. Yes, you can buy and sell them, but the foreigners were the ones selling them, because it said you can buy their kids. And why would you buy foreigners' kids, right? If I was racist and wanted to promote slavery, I wouldn't buy slaves from the people I could enslave. I just forced the slaves to breed and make more slaves. But instead, they let the foreigners live among them and then buy their kids. Make that make sense, right? So let's check this out, see what it says, and then y'all can type away in the comments. We'll watch another video. Y'all can hate some more, and we can type in the comments again.
Much of the slavery described in the Old Testament was debt or indentured servitude. Debt slavery was where people went into labor contracts for a period of time. Those in debt slavery were only bound to a master for the duration of the labor contract. However, there was also another kind slavery that some have described as chattel slavery. This was taking foreigners into permanent bondage. This is where opponents of the Bible usually center their opposition. If the ownership of another human being was wrong, then why did the Bible allow chattel slavery? First, the question is whether there was chattel slavery described in the Bible. While taking foreigners into perpetual slavery was allowed, there were yet loopholes. According to rabbinical writings, if foreigners converted from their religion and practices, they were able to access the same rights available to Israelites. This proselytization was necessary to show the foreigners were willing to culturally assimilate. In the absence of policing and prison systems, it would have been unwise to release foreigners, perhaps captives of war, into the society where they could have potentially done considerable harm.
And this is very much the case. And in fact, one of the greatest things they had to do was to be circumcised as grown adults, right? As a child, when you're a baby, most people don't really remember anything from being that young, right? So it's not too crazy. They would do it after like 7 days or something to a baby in that culture. For prisoners of war who wanted to be assimilated into the culture, they had to go through that. And if you're a man, you know exactly how bad getting castrated as an adult could be. But they had to do that as an adult, right? To say, hey, I'm cool with being in the Israelite society, right? Even though y'all beat us and killed a lot of our people, I'm cool with it. Do what you got to do down there, and I'll suffer through it just to be part of you guys now, right? How I changed my ways, and they'd have to suffer through that. So let's continue, because that's not an easy thing to get through.
Regardless, slaves who escaped cruel treatment were under no obligation to return. Masters were therefore advised against cruelty. Furthermore, looking at the word ownership, this would not have been as reconcilable to the Bible as it were with other cultures because of the strict monotheistic belief pronounced at the time. None in Israel had the divine decree to possess another human being. Any ownership therefore mentioned would have been in reference to holding custody over another's labor. Ownership first has to be viewed within the context of use before determining morality. If ownership is always categorically wrong, how do we explain it when convicted criminals become wardens of the government? Is it wrong to hold people for crimes? More to come.
So right here, we're looking at the word akuza, which is what the Bible translates every single time as possessions, right? And it does have a root word. We can check that out in a second. But it says that it's possessions, property, land, or just a possession by inheritance, right? Something being seized coming from this possession, especially of a land of possession, right? We can see here possession of landed and all this stuff, and this goes through and talks about Leviticus 20:45 and 46, 25:45, my bad, which is what the slaves were talking, right? That's a slave verse. We see of this, right? Possession, especially used the possession of land and fields, possession of the land, possesses that land, burying place belonging to a family, and used of slaves. And I like that they use it for not only land, but also these slaves, because to some extent, right, you inherit land. Land is something to be cherished, right? It's an inheritance. This is a gift. This is a good thing, right? Not to say that, slavery was a good thing or buying or selling people was a good thing necessarily, right? But the land you inherited, usually had some type of value. These people that could be possessions had some type of value, right? You wouldn't just get your land and say, all right, let me start burning stuff down. Let me start doing this and this and that. You look at it like, my parents worked hard for this thing to be used in a good way, and I should uphold it and treat it nicely so that it continues working in the utmost condition, right? That's what a reasonable person would do. Same way that you would inherit a slave and you wouldn't treat them badly because this is a inheritance. You don't go squandering off your inheritance. That was the whole point of Jesus's parable of the prodigal son, where he went and squandered his inheritance. That would be the same as him beating and mistreating his slaves and then saying, Dad, I have no more slaves left. They'd be like, well, you beat them all and ruined them. That's your fault, right? But instead, it's something to be cherished, something to be upheld, and something to be treated fairly and nicely, so that not only do you get the maximum value out of it, but also you use it as intended, as the gift that it was, with the value that it holds, right? So that's why I like the fact that this word is used as for the slaves as it is for the land, because you wouldn't mistreat your inheritance. It's something with value. People have value, regardless of the position that they're in with these contracts or not, right? Chattel slavery or not, these people had some type of value to where they were an inheritance, right? And this is the word it comes from, which means to hold, to take, possess, caught, fastened, all this. Grasp, take hold, seize, take possession of, all this type of jazz. And I think that this verse from Exodus has some value to it as well. It was mentioned with this word to take, grasp, and hold, and take seize of, which was used for, hold on, I gotta go back to the verse to see which exact word it was. Fear has gripped the inhabitants of Philistia, right? Because this defeat that Israel has just, well, this victory that Israel had just claimed had fear take hold of people, right? And then they talk about they're going to go, all these people are trembling, take hold of them, right? Take hold of these people that you've just conquered. All the inhabitants of Canaan will melt away. Fear and dread will fall upon them. By the greatness of your arm, they shall be as still as a stone until your people pass over, O Lord, the Israelites, till the people pass over whom you have purchased. These people that they have just defeated, they have purchased. And you will bring them in and you'll plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, right? You're not going to beat them, kill them, whatever. You're going to bring them in and plant them in the place, O Lord, which you have made for your own dwelling, the sanctuary, O Lord. Nothing about mistreating them or anything. You shall reign forever and ever, right? And this is talking about the waters being brought upon Pharaoh and them, but these people, so the people passed over whom you have purchased, right? The slaves that they have purchased are going to go with them. This isn't Egypt, right? The Egyptian people died, but the people they've purchased are going into the mountain of the inheritance with them. So anyway, let's check out, since we've seen all that now, we have another video to check out from Cold Case Christianity. Does the Bible support slavery? Love this channel. Let's check it out.
Does the Bible condone slavery? When I first started reading through Scripture, I started to see that there were descriptions in the New Testament and the Old Testament involving slaves. And these descriptions were relatively benign, as though we were to take for granted the existence of slaves. Does God condone slavery? Does God just accept this as just the way it's going to be, the way it's always been? How could that be? I couldn't imagine a God that would condone such a horrific thing. But I think part of the problem is in answering this kind of an objection is just understanding the definition of slavery. Look, when we hear that word, we always refer in our mind to what we know as New World slavery, right? The kind of slavery that we engaged in here in America that was so repulsive. But is that the same as ancient Near Eastern slavery? Even though the word may be the same, is the concept the same? They are two very different things in a number of ways. Number one, the benefit, the financial benefit that slavery offered in the New World was that the slave owner got all the benefit. In the ancient Near Eastern version of this term, often it was the slave himself who entered into slavery because of a financial debt that was owed. As a matter of fact, that's another way that they were different. The way into slavery in the New World, of course, was involuntary. People were subjugated into slavery, but in the ancient Near East, often people entered into this kind of servitude voluntarily to pay a debt. As a matter of fact, the way out of slavery was different, right? I mean, in the New World, there was no way out of slavery. In the ancient Near Eastern, there were several biblical pathways for slaves to be freed. Actually, the way slaves were treated was even different. In the New World slavery we think about, slaves were treated as property. In the ancient Near East, they were given the same rights, and they were actually laid out by biblical mandates, the rights that other human beings are given. Why are these two things so different? Well, let's be careful when we talk about what it is God might condone. Are we talking about the kind of New World slavery that we think of today, or something very different? And it's different in really the way you entered, the way you got out, the way you were treated while you were there. Very different concepts. But let me give you another thing to think about as you try to answer this briefly. We have certain things in place, certain institutions in place that answer or solve certain problems for us. So, for example, if you're in debt to a financial institution, well, we have financial institutions that could figure out what to do with that debt. If you don't pay your debts, you're going to end up in some kind of legal trouble, and you may actually go to jail. Well, it turns out we have financial institutions today, and we also have penitentiary systems today to deal with these two issues. Those weren't in place in the ancient Near East. If you were somebody who had a debt in the ancient Near East, there was no financial institution to kind of come and mitigate that debt, and there were no penitentiaries that could place people in custody. The vast majority of people who were involved in voluntary servitude, called slavery, were people who had a financial debt to pay off, or were people who had committed a war crime or other crime that they were paying off. Those systems were in place to deal with wrongdoers or people who were in debt. And they didn't have the institutions that we have today, so you can see why they might resort to other means to solve those two problems. So let's be careful when we talk about slavery and what kind of slavery, quote unquote, God would condone. Different way in, different way out. A different way you were treated while you were there, a pathway that could get you out. And it's really only a last resort because they lack the kinds of institutions and structures that would take care of the problem in a different way. And finally, let me just give you one last thing to think about. The same Bible that people say condones slavery was the text that the abolitionist movement used to free the slaves. The same Bible that was misinterpreted to condone New World slavery when the Bible was not describing New World slavery to begin with is the same text that Wilberforce used as part of the abolitionist movement. On the basis of what was that movement started? On the basis of a biblical notion that all of us are of the same family, that we are not to be treated differently, that there is no race in the eyes of God, that humans look at the outward condition of man, but God looks at the heart, that we have a certain dignity as humans in the image, created in the image of God, that there is no brown race, white race, yellow race, red race. There's just a human race in the eyes of God. That is the clear teaching of Scripture and the teaching that motivated and propelled the abolitionist movement. Does the Bible condone slavery? Of course not. But does it describe slavery? Yes, it does, but not the slavery that you might be thinking of.
So my only problem with that video, obviously, is that he didn't bring any verses to back it up. But at the same point, like, all this stuff is readily available. I've showed you quite enough through the past week of the different verses, the different concepts, the different etymologies of these words to show you how this is not the same slavery, right? And you have somebody who's more well versed in the topic than I am describing the overall concepts of it, right? Not only did they place restrictions, right? We talked about if you hit your slave for discipline's sake, break his eye, you have to let him go for his eye's sake, right? You ruined his eye. Obviously, that's greater than the debt involved. If you beat your slave, kill him, the master's to be put to death. If he recovers in a day or two, obviously it was meant as discipline and it just went a little bit too far. But obviously, that's not the problem. The problem is when you mistreat these people, right? You hit them for discipline's sake. Were there some people that probably abused that back then? Probably. Do we have any writings about that? I don't, or don't know any that exist, right? But as far as I know, the Bible says if you kill your slave, you are to be put to death. If you maim your slave, you are to let him go free. And all these other type of restrictions to show them how to properly care for another individual who's working off a debt to you. And just the fact that it's about working off the debt, it's not about, oh, war criminal, take him in, and he's our slave now. If you can find the verses on that, let me know. Because as far as I've seen, they had the people living among them that would sell their own children, right? These people, these Gentiles, would live among Israelite society, not racist, because they're letting these people live among them, and they're willingly selling their kids to the Israelite people to be used, right? Voluntarily selling their kids to be used. And then there's restrictions, right? Obviously, those kids have protections in the sense that we just talked about. You kill one, the master should be put to death. You maim it, that kid gets set free. All this type of jazz to show this is not the same as slavery we think of today. If you have verses, put them in the comment section. If you have another thought, back it up with some evidence. Don't just say it's chattel slavery. Because then who's the fool? Who's the one coming without evidence, bro? Like, it's not me. I done just made a whole 10+ minute video about the fact that it's not that. With evidence, resources, and proof overall. Yeah, right, and I got like 3 other videos in the past week that do the same thing. If you want to watch them, go ahead. If you want to leave a comment, make sure that you have some level of truth in it. Don't just say words, because I'm not just going to take your word for it, right? He didn't show any verses, but he was talking about all the things that we've been talking about the whole time. So it's okay. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to have some proof with it. All right, that's going to be the end of the video. Hope you guys have yourself a fantastic rest of your day. Peace.